Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining me today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Jon Laansma. He's the Gerald F. Hawthorne Professor of New Testament Greek and Exegesis here at Wheaton College. He's also Department Chair of Modern and Classical Languages. It's good to see you, my friend.
It's so good to see you back on Wheaton's campus.
Oh, listen, it's just been great.
And it's a nice season to visit the Midwest.
Oh, it is. I mean, the fall. Mm-hmm. I mean, the weather here in the fall is fantastic.
I love the fall.
I mean, except for a few months out of the year, it just gets a little bitter cold. But, well, we're months away from something like that, I hope. Today, we're going to talk about word studies. A lot of people, when they think about Bible study, they think about studying a word.
Yep.
And we're going to look at the Transfiguration as kind of a model for that. So what are we looking at?
Well, we will use the Transfiguration, and you're exactly right that I think for most of us who listen, whether online or just listen to preaching, we can get the sense that the essence of exegesis is words and examining words, or at least it's a panacea of all exegetical woes. And words are very important, but it's also important to make some distinctions in how we think about how words work and how to study them. So that's what we want to talk about. And first, just three simple kinds of distinctions. If your job is to write a dictionary, then of course your whole job is to break words apart from each other and isolate a word and come up with its meaning or meanings. But if you're an exegete, if you're reading a text, then it's important to understand that the meaning is less in the words than it is in the sentences and paragraphs. And sentences and paragraphs are kind of like a puree of grammar and vocabulary and other elements. And it's almost counter nature to try to break that apart into its bits as if there's, as if it's pixelated or something, as if the meaning is in the little bits. So you want to understand what it is you're doing as an exegete and where the meaning is. Secondly, another kind of broad distinction is just understanding how communication happens, what's happening right now between you and me in this room. Words, we can think of words almost like a conveyor belt from my mind to your mind.
It's a great image, yeah.
At a gravel pit, taking buckets of discrete bits of meaning to you. Whereas in actual fact, in communication, if we think about it, it's a collaborative process in terms of generating meaning. Words function, except maybe in poetry, but in everyday conversation, words are triggers, they're gestures. I'm kind of tossing words your direction. I'm depending on your ability to unpack those words and recognize implications and recognize necessary context. And so there's a lot more meaning going on than is contained in any of those words individually. And I think you had Gene Green on an earlier episode to talk about this at more length.
Yeah, he
Technical
did.
phrase is relevance theory, but it can be made sort of common sense. So we need to understand that. And then also, as we approach the task of word studies, it's really important to make a distinction between theme studies or idea studies, using those interchangeably, and word studies. And very often when we think we're after the meaning of a word, if we thought about it, what we're really after is an idea or a theme, love or peace or something else.
And that's really not disconnected from everything else. That's not just a single word.
It's not right.
It's connected to other things in the text itself.
So there may be words that convey that idea, but you're going to want to look at a range of synonyms, even antonyms, passages that don't even use the words to get at that idea or theme. So if you get through all that and you boil it down, you say, but I do want to study words. There are still going to be distinctions that require you to step back and ask, what is the question you're really asking of the text? What is it you really want to know as an exegete, not as an author of a dictionary, but an exegete? So that's where the Transfiguration becomes kind of handy as an illustration. And I'm not going to give an exhaustive list, but 4 possible kinds of questions that you can ask revolving around words. So, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record this, and they're overlapping accounts, and they're similar in some ways, different in other ways. One of the points where they differ is in their attempt to paint, as it were, a verbal picture of what Jesus looked like when he started to change. And they all use slightly different vocabulary at that point. Matthew says he alemst, using the verb lampo.
Where we get the word lamp from.
Yeah, right. Which means to emit rays of light or to shine, right? Now, the point is we don't have any other access to this thing, this reality. All we have are these verbal descriptions. And so all we can do is take those words and try to get a sense of what they mean, the sense of the words, of lampo in this case. And we would do that by looking at various contexts where that verb is used, inferring its use in these different contexts. We would look at synonyms, antonyms. We'd put it on the larger map of the language. It's a measure of how this word's meaning is distinguished from other words that could have been used, the sense of the word. That's probably what most of us are thinking we're doing in all word studies, but that's just, one kind of question to ask. Because if you go on in the description, at least in Matthew's account, it said he was metamorphao. That's the verb that's used, metamorphao. That's the word from which we get transfigured. He was transformed. Now, you can do the same thing with that word. You look it up in all those texts, study synonyms, antonyms. When it's all done, you're going to end up saying the sense of the word is it indicates a change in appearance or possibly an internal change of nature. And that's good, that's helpful. But as an exegete, you're probably going to say, that doesn't really scratch my itch, because what I want to know is what happened up there. And I'm studying the word metamorphao to figure out, what is it that happened? What was this reality? And knowing the word's meaning or sense doesn't get us very far. So then you're probably going to want to take further steps where you look at the context, try to infer what they thought the significance of this was as they narrated this. Some of those clues point in the direction of the resurrection. So what you might do then is slide over to the resurrection narratives or 1 Corinthians 15, which don't use the verb metamorphao, but they do give other perspectives on the thing being talked about, which is what you're probably really after when you're looking at that word, if you notice the distinction. So that's 2. Thirdly, even before that, it says they went up on a high aras, a mountain. Okay, well, if you look that up, if you get the sense of the word, it means high hill, a mountain, higher than a bunas, which is a lower elevation hill. Well, big whoopee ding dong. I mean, so it's a mountain. What does that really tell you about what it is? And we don't know the referent.
We don't know the real mountain.
No, we don't know where this took place.
If you go to Israel, they might say, well, here's the mountain of Transfiguration.
That one or that one. Yeah, we don't know the referent. But again, if you read the context, the clues are all over the place that we're to be thinking not just of that aras, but of other arases from Jewish history, especially Mount Sinai, where there is a lot of verbal overlap between the Transfiguration narrative and things said about Moses on Mount Sinai, or even Mount Zion, or just the holy mountain idea out of the Old Testament and ancient Near East. So it's clear the significance of that word for an exegete is not so much its meaning or its referent, but its larger associations and connotations, and that's really what we're after. So that's third. But then fourth, these words were out of Matthew, but if we slide over to Luke, Luke alone tells us that it was while Jesus was praying, and the verb is proseuchomai, common verb for praying, that he changed in his appearance. Well, again, we can study the sense of it. It means to entreat God in some way, but that doesn't get us very far. We don't know the referent because we don't know the content of the prayer. Maybe to some extent, these associations or connotations that we saw with metamorphao are in view. But really the significant thing here is that it is Luke alone who adds that detail to the Transfiguration. And it's also Luke alone that way back in the baptism of Jesus adds the detail that it was while Jesus was praying that the dove descended on him and so forth.
Right. And the baptism is almost secondary, isn't it? It's the descent of the Spirit.
Exactly.
Jesus is baptized, but
Right.
it's with a word or two that's said.
Right.
But it's this other sort of experience that he has while praying of the Spirit,
Exactly.
of the voice
Yeah.
that he hears from heaven.
So now the word proseuchomai is probably of interest to us as an exegete. Again, not so much for its meaning, not so much for its referent, possibly for some of the associations, but particularly because it signals what technical exegetes call a redactional theme, a special interest of Luke in telling the story of Jesus, where he highlights the prayers of Jesus and the prayers of the community.
Yeah.
That's what he wants us to pick up on there.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. This is a great way of thinking about these particular words.
It's fun stuff.
But it really is. As you were talking, I was thinking about how in other places in Matthew's gospel, mountains continue to figure. You have the Sermon on the Mount, right? You have the Mount of Transfiguration, and then the gospel ends with Jesus and his disciples on a mountain. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about, well, what did mountains do? What did they stand for in those days? Why were temples built on mountains, right?
Right, exactly.
And what is our sort of existential experience when we're on a mountain?
Yeah,
and
so
we
now you're
see
off
these
and running.
you go all kinds of different places with it.
Yep. And we think all we want to know is Aras means high hill. And that's what we think of.
Yeah.
But no. We have all these other questions.
That's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
Yeah, and part of the key is shining that light kind of inward on your mind to figure out what are the questions I'm really trying to ask of this text, because they require different strategies of reading the text.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Dr. Jon Laansma, thanks for being with us today.
Always glad to be
on
here.
Exegetically Speaking. Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who help us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to Jon Laansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, a first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.